Okay, so today we're going to be reviewing this. This is the Leica M11 Monochrom. This only shoots in black and white. It's manual focus, very, very similar to the M11, which I used around London. I really enjoyed. I've been using this for the best part of about a week. Out and about, yes, and also a little bit of a studio environment as well. This is a really interesting camera because on the surface, it does seem like it has some limitations, right? Some pretty big limitations. Only shoots in black and white, only shoots manual focus. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to use. Yes, beautiful image quality. We'll talk about all of that. Beautiful kind of build and design and all that kind of stuff as well. There's some limitations in the way you'd use it. But the only way you can really properly review this camera is to actually talk about the experience of using it out and about, actually using it as a photographer, which I know sounds obvious, but the more I've used this, the more I've kind of really enjoyed my time with it. I've really liked using this. It's pretty much identical to the M11 in a lot of different ways, but there are actually some differences. So for example, this is a 60 megapixel BSI CMOS sensor in here. The images are, frankly, they're stunning. I mean, that is what you would expect from a Leica M camera like this. It was true on the M11. Absolutely makes sense that it's true here as well. You also have the ability to reduce that down to 36 megapixels or 18 megapixels in camera if you either want a smaller file size, or of course you can do digital zooming as well. So I've pretty much been using this 50mm f1.4 lens, which by the way, is unreal. It's such a lovely lens, but it does mean that I have the ability to punch in and punch in again. But what is interesting about the M11 Monochrom is it's not just shooting in black and white. It's not just the M11 but just with a black and white filter on it. Leica have actually removed the color array, which is quite a big deal because it actually gives you one stop extra EV of light, which is a big thing, right? I mean, that's something that we make a big deal out of when it comes to lenses, when it comes to cameras being able to kind of increase that. We'll actually make decisions on which camera to go to. So that's quite a big deal here. But otherwise, you really are choosing to go for this camera over, let's say, the standard M11, or indeed any other camera, because you're making a choice about the kind of photos that you like to take. And I've got to be honest, the black and white on this is just so beautiful. It's so punchy. You know, there's so much contrast. It looks beautiful. And actually taking those images out and bringing them into Lightroom, I found them very, very easy to work with. A lot of room to bring those shadows up, play around with the highlights. There's a lot of flexibility there when it comes to editing, which I wasn't really expecting as something that I would actually feel the need to actually bring up. It also means that the base ISO on this camera is 125, where it's 64 on the standard M11. And actually, it seems like you're getting better noise performance on the various ISO levels. So stepping up that ISO, actually getting better noise performance, seeing less digital noise, using a higher ISO value, and I actually had no problem. I mean, I was completely comfortable using 3200, 6400. That wasn't really bothering me at all. I didn't have to do any noise reduction in post or anything like that at all. But before we move on to the actual design of the camera and some of the kind of features of that, I did feel like while using this camera, certainly the longer I used it, the more I liked it actually. I really enjoyed the experience of using this camera, and especially by the end. You know, I could quite happily keep hold of this actually. It's really fun to head out and about and do portraits, do landscape. Part of that is because it really slows you down, right? Because you're shooting only in black and white, you aren't focusing, I mean, it sounds silly, but on color, obviously, right? Which means you are really focused in on the light, you are really focused in on the composition, and you're really thinking a little bit more like that. It kind of switched on my photography brain in a slightly more engaged way. And then because it's manual focus only, I'm going a little bit slower, right? I'm really thinking about things. I'm really taking my time. It felt a lot like shooting film, and that's a really fun experience. And I actually feel like it kind of can make you, kind of force you to be a little bit of a better photographer just because you're putting more thought into every shot, because more actions are going into that, if that makes sense. And that's a big thing about the M cameras, but certainly the Monochrom as well. That's a really big deal. Now, if you're familiar with the standard M11, you will be right at home here. You've got the lovely rangefinder up here in the top left. You've got the 2.3 million dot LCD on the back, which is a touchscreen. And I've got to say, it's very easy to control the camera with the touchscreen, actually. I found myself doing that quite a lot, but otherwise you do have kind of controls around the screen as well. It's quite minimalist in terms of what there actually is to use. But it all feels really good, as you'd expect with the Leica. If you've ever used a Leica, you know it's very lovely stuff. Otherwise, the look of the camera is slightly different though. You don't have the red Leica dot on the front, which I actually really like. I like this kind of all black design. I think I think it's pretty cool actually. ISO dial on the top, shutter speed dial on the top as well. You can map ISO to one of these little scrollers as well, which is quite handy. But otherwise, I kind of like the analog feel of it. Again, it just lends itself to the same kind of feel, that film camera kind of feel that you're really getting when you're using a camera like this. Now the screen does not flip out, it doesn't articulate in any way, which I'll be honest is a little bit of a shame, only because it's so useful, right? And you get used to that and that's something that you really enjoy. It's not the end of the world. I wish that it did. I think I get why Leica don't have it do that. I think they want this very specific design, very sleek look to things. And maybe as a Leica user, if you're coming from a different Leica, maybe you actually are quite happy with it not articulating. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe that's something that Leica users are not a fan of. For me personally, I would have liked it, but I guess I do kind of understand it. Otherwise though, it looks great. It's a nice high resolution screen, super easy with focus peaking as well to help with manual focusing, and also doing things like pinch and zoom as well to make sure you are getting nice, crisp focus. Now you have got one SD card slot just here under where the battery is, which goes in right there. But there's also 256 gigabytes of built-in storage in the camera, which is such a good idea. It's such a crazy good idea. I can't believe that's not in more cameras. It's so useful to not have to worry about the SD card. Yeah, I pop one in because I'm just used to putting an SD card in. It's just nice and easy. But if you don't want to, or you forget one or anything like that, 256 gigabytes is a lot of storage. You can really just go crazy. You don't have to worry about filling this up really anytime soon, because that's so much storage, so useful to have that in the camera. And then USB-C to just connect that camera to your computer, super easy. The only other thing that really kind of bothered me a little bit is that it's a little bit slow to start up. If I turn this on now, let's turn this on. There we go. So it's not loads and loads of time, but it's enough time that if you're in a situation where, you know, street photography, which is something I can imagine using this camera for, you could end up in a situation where you miss the moment if you haven't got the camera already on. So that's something to be aware of as well. But otherwise, I mean, they're just minor things, right? It's really not the end of the world. When I tend to go out and do street photography, I'm not turning the camera off between each shot, right? I'm walking around with the camera on, ready to go. And the battery life feels like it's very good. I didn't have any issues with battery life at all. In fact, I went out a few times without charging the camera. So battery life doesn't seem like it's an issue whatsoever. I've got to say though, I am absolutely in love with the images that are coming out of this camera. They're so beautiful. I mean, it's probably to be expected on a camera like this, but it really is stunning to actually see them in nice and black and white. Really, really lovely. And like I say, while it might feel like there's a bit of a limitation when it comes to only black and white, only manual focus at first, that quickly changes to actually being a really enjoyable way to shoot your photos. And if you're someone who does dabble in black and white, if you like black and white, this is quite an easy choice, I think. And I mean, there's no surprise really, because this is a Leica and there are certain things you expect from a Leica. But this is a stunning camera in a lot of different ways. Now you can check out the full spec of this camera, pricing, full spec, all that kind of fun stuff, but check out the link down in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. There's new content all the time. I will of course see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.